calm, cool, and collected. I would not want to be Chris Kyle right now. But this is the anatomy. Remember, they lied and said Saddam was throwing babies out of incubators. Not that Saddam's a good guy. The point is they lied. Remember, Pat Tillman wrote letters home, said, I'm coming home to speak out. They claimed he died charging a hill to fight al-Qaeda. Really, the U.S. government shot him to death. That came out in the coroner report. Pat Tillman, yeah, government murdered him. Look it up, folks, if you're a new listener. So I've talked to his brother. So the point is, all of this is going on. Private Lynch, that whole fake thing where she didn't shoot all those troops, those Iraqis, that was all made up. They do these PR reports, and this guy's hooked up heavy with some really nasty groups. He comes out to assassinate Ventura's character. If you don't know the backstory of this, we're going to Tyrell in just a moment. They hire Ventura right before 2003 on MSNBC. He's got this $9+ million contract for 3 years. He thinks, great, big primetime show. They get ready for the Iraq war, and they say, look, you can keep the money if you don't criticize the war, but if you keep criticizing the war, you're gone. And he says, well, I'm just not going to, I'm going to criticize the war. They say, you're fired, but we're going to keep giving you the money. We're holding your contract. You can't give media interviews for 3 years. And later he was told by NBC and insiders that was done because they knew you were going to be anti-war. They'd assessed you golden handcuffs. So they're scared of Ventura. They know he's one of the few political dark horse wild cards. This is a big deal, folks. This is another sign they're going into Iran, that they would totally make this up. This is a lot bigger than Jesse Ventura or Ron Paul or whatever. This is about the fact that they can politically destroy people. Tyrell, I wanted to intro that. We're going to come back here in a moment and start the interview with your dad, but most of it's coming up in the next hour. It's about 35 minutes long. But, I mean, wow. You know, before you could get a hold of your dad, because he just entered Mexico driving an RV, they launched this, you know, right at the right time. We knew this had to be made up just because of your dad's view of the troops and how much he loves them. But now he said it's pure bull. But, wow, amazing psyop. Why do you think this is being done?
Well, I think it's being done for exactly those same reasons. You know, you have to discredit the pacifists at home. You know, if you have people that speak out against global wars and things of that nature who hold sway with the working class and the general public of this country, and also with the people who, you know, will end up sacrificing their children to these wars, you know, you have to assassinate that. So what better way to do it? You don't have to put a bullet in him. What better way to do it? You have a fellow Navy SEAL come out and spread flagrant lies, things that Jesse would never, ever say, on you know, your government propaganda news channels like Fox News and the rest of them. You know, I find it very interesting, and you know, we'll get to Jesse's interview, but here's an interesting observation. O'Reilly and a lot of these other people, you know, Brian Kilmeade, all of them, who are all outraged and appalled at what this, you know, this Kyle claims Jesse said about saying, you know, you people deserve to lose a few soldiers, deserve to lose a few guys. They're all appalled by that and that statement. Even though Jesse never said it, they're appalled by that statement. Well, I find it very hypocritical that these are the same people that are the biggest cheerleaders and are the biggest pro-war people. Well, you know what? They're sending U.S. soldiers off to die by cheerleading these wars. So what's the difference?
But I don't like to talk about your dad privately, but in shooting 3 seasons of a TV show with him, I've flown with him, hung out with him a lot. I mean, he's a, you know, guy that hides his emotions, but he shakes troops' hands, gets tears in his eyes, always talks about these wars are killing great troops. It's the politicians' fault. The troops are still heroes. This is designed like a dark sword to stab Jesse in the heart politically and turn the SEALs against him. I want to come back and talk more about this. Then we'll start the interview with Jesse Ventura, and it starts powerful, but gets really powerful towards the end. It's all coming up. Stay with us. So imagine you're Jesse Ventura, you speak your mind, you got millions of people that listen to you, every book that comes out exposing the New World Order, it's a bestseller on the New York Times, and you get the word that you were road raging in California, even though you're sitting there in your home in Minnesota. Then you drive down to your home in Baja, California, and learn you were knocked out and that you love Navy SEALs dying. And you watch some punk on TV saying it over and over again, and people taking it like it's absolute proof with no proof. This is an illustration of the type of people we're dealing with. And they're doing similar stuff to Ron Paul right now. Remember that. Don't right off the bat believe something when CNN says, Ron Paul's putting out ads bashing Asians. 2 days later, it's admitted somebody else made it. Now, going back to Tyrell Ventura, Ty, other points you'd like to make before we get this interview with your dad. I know I asked you on here, and there's so many points we could make, but, I mean, this really shows how scared they are of him and anybody else that's got a name that'll criticize what they're doing.
Well, I agree, and let's also just look at how operations like this work. Somewhere the CIA has basically a rough kind of psychological profile or a profile they put together on Jesse Ventura. They kind of know, like, how he acts, things like that. They can look at his record as governor, things like that. They know he's big and he's loud. He speaks his mind. So they look at things like that. And then what they do in concocting a completely false story to convince the average John Q. citizen who doesn't necessarily follow every Jesse's word, but kind of is aware of him, and then knows, okay, yeah, he's kind of a loud guy, speaks his mind, controversial guy. So when they want to spread false stories through puppets like Kyle, they put little details that kind of sound like Jesse but aren't really. So they put just enough details to make it seem like, well, that could be Jesse in his story, to where then that way John Q. public, when they hear that, it says, well, I know he's kind of loud and I know he's kind of controversial. Must be him. It sounds just like him. But then they mix in these like flagrant lies within that story, and they do that whenever they're trying to publicly assassinate someone, through the media and things like that.
And why would they be going after him? Suing the TSA, going all over the media, criticizing their groping and criminal activity.
Because if they're locking down this country and going to lock us down into a police state and tell us all it's for our own good, but then you have other people like Mr. Ventura, like my father, like yourself, saying, no, this is BS, this is a violation of our Constitution, who are willing to take it to courts to fight it, and who are very vocal with television shows and other such things, that's a threat to them.
Exactly, I was about to add.
They know that they're ramping up to an Iran. They want a war with Iran. They want that because it's millions of dollars. It's what they've been designed. That's why they went for, think about it, Afghanistan and Iraq, border Iran, they have them cornered. They have it's so logical that our next place they want to go is Iran. But they know people like Ron Paul, people like my father, people like yourself, are not going to stand for that and are going to be very vocal and against that war and call them out when they BS and they try to lie and deceive the people into believing that Iran is a threat to the United States. It is not.
Well, you're right. It's super creepy. They're demonizing Ron Paul. They're demonizing myself. Now with Jesse, they're coming out and saying he's at a wake, saying, I'm glad you're dead to the family. I mean, just the most made-up, horrible thing you could say. And this guy now is seeking government contracts. He's a mercenary to train our local police and Homeland Security, clearly put up to it. If you look at the information, and here's your dad criticizing the TSA, criticizing JFK, 9/11, the wars, best-selling books. They know his new book's coming out. They know he was thinking about running for president. This is a preemptive strike against him. And, Ty, it happens right as they know he crosses into Mexico and doesn't have a cell phone for 3 days to get to Baja.
Oh, exactly. We've known for a long time that they tap our phones or watch our emails. I'm sure they do because of the threat that our family
Your dad's been visited by the CIA when he was governor.
Exactly. So they knew when he was crossing the border, and it's very convenient. It's also very convenient that almost every show that has had this guy on is a cable news show that Jesse has been on and has totally made their hosts look like buffoons. The only show he hasn't been on is Bill O'Reilly's, and Jesse has numerously called Bill O'Reilly a coward for not having him on and debating him on these current issues. And I find it very convenient.
Well, I've got to say it about your dad. On all these shows, just his straightforward approach, he dominates them. He has annihilated all of these shows.
Yeah, so that's why it's very interesting that, Opie and Anthony break the story with that weird idiot Jim Norton, and all these little pipsqueak types who have never really done anything in their lives. It's very convenient that they are so welcoming of this guy without even questioning the authenticity of his story. Oh, okay, he must be telling the truth. Why? Oh, well, he's a soldier, he works for the government. Oh, okay, well, that's it? That's all they have for proof? You're taking this man's word for it?
Well, coming up in the interview, they've got a big problem. It turns out the owner of this bar, McPease, was the guy that trained your dad and was like, the head trainer, and they're good friends. And so this is all going to come out later that it never happened, and that it would have been, well known if this happened, and that he wasn't there to speak to a graduating class, like the guy said, and it's all fake. And again, it's an example of a psyop. But if they can claim your dad was throwing babies out of incubators, just long enough, it'll work for them. And I agree with you, Ty, because we've been thinking about this. Before I got you on air, you said, I think it's about Iran. And I had separately already talked about that with your dad.
Yeah, no, it feels that way, because the more I read about all this hubbub that they're making up about Iran's big imminent threat to Israel and to us, I'm sorry. Iran, the leader, was it Ahmadinejad or whatever?
Yeah.
He doesn't make decisions in that country. People have to realize he's pretty much just like a puppet that they kind of put out front, and he just says his piece. But really, he doesn't make any decisions there. He can be as crazy as he wants to be, but he doesn't have any legislative control in that.
It's the mullahs that run it all.
Exactly. So, no matter what that guy wants to say, whether you agree with him or disagree with him or whatever, he doesn't have any real political power.
Well, look, Ty, here's the reason the former head of the Mossad that Netanyahu fired a year ago because he wouldn't go along with it said. Here's the reason Fox Fallon and Admiral Mullen and the last 3 Joint Chiefs of Staff in the U.S. said don't do it. Iran hasn't been under 15 years of sanctions. Iran is 75 million people, not 25 million. Iran's got high-tech weapons. Iran is going to block the Strait of Hormuz. It is going to cause all Hades to break loose, but that's exactly what the bankers want to distract us. I mean, this is not going to be some third world country that, that the globalists are just using us to invade and destroy. This is going to be a real war.
And look, this all goes back. I mean, even General Wesley Clark back right after 9/11, when 3 weeks later they're telling him, "Oh, we're going into Iraq," and he says, "Well, why?" He says, "Did they find weapons of mass destruction? No. Well, we're going in." He even illustrated all the countries that needed to fall.
Yeah, he said, "Here's the secret plan. We're going to invade 8 of them."
Yeah, exactly. And now a lot of them have fallen because of revolution and things like that. But if you look at if you trace the history of some of the people in those revolutions, they're clearly CIA and intelligence people, like the general in the Egyptian army that was fighting back against the government was a complete CIA guy. And so you see all these countries fall, and it's exactly falling into place for what they've been plotting for probably the last 20 years, 30 years.
Well, that's what's frustrating is America is a good country full of good people.
It is.
We have global mega banks that have taken over our government, are using us to take over the world, and they're playing us off against China, against the Iranians. They're globalists. They're against countries. So we think of it as countries, America versus China versus Iran, Russia. It's way past that.
Yeah. We are simply tools that the super corporations and the super banks of the world use to make more money, and the slave labor that we give them, and the soldiers that we provide them. And that's what's so tragic. You have very honorable men and women in uniform who are basically used as pawns for this global game.
I tell you what, Ty, there's a little 5-minute segment coming up at the start of the next hour. I want to hold you over to there, and then I'll just come back and air the entire 35-minute Governor Jesse Ventura interview, and then cover some other news and take calls in the last 15, 20 minutes of the broadcast. We're going to go to break here, but when we come back briefly, I mean, look at these headlines. Because Fox News, I watched it, spent more time and other channels on your father trying to destroy him with these made-up fairy tales than they did on this. Look at these headlines. Iran decides to close Strait of Hormuz if oil exports are blocked. The EU set to vote tomorrow to shut it down. That's going to happen. American, British, Israeli, and Iranian warships sailing towards confrontation. Jerusalem Post reports and Financial Times of London, Iran, Israel, and U.S. plan Gulf exercises all at the same time. I mean, it's on. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, this is what the RAND Corporation called for 2 years ago, is something bigger than just a regional war. Most analysts say this could kick off World War III. Second hour coming up on your local station and the audio streams at Infowars.com. Stay with us. Jesse Ventura interview.
Jones and the GCN Radio Network.